Hey, movie fans. So, I'm here to talk about another set of movies this month. And these are movies that I actually enjoyed. I'm not going to pretend that I went through a lot of trouble to find them and, didn't enjoy watching them like I did with the Slenderman movies. I wasn't pretending, I just didn't enjoy watching them. The Puppet Master is a series of films that I own physically. I own an entire steamer trunk filled with the DVDs that they sold last year, I think. I love these movies. These are the movies that got me into horror films. I don't know why. When I was a very young kid, I saw my mom watching The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox. The Frighteners is not a scary movie, but there is a scene in which a ghost dressed up as Death attacks Michael J. Fox at a museum. The other ghosts fight him off. He escapes. But that visage of Death, that character pretending to be Death, was so scarring to me as a small child that I never watched any horror movies until I was about 13, 14 years old. Then, for some reason, I walked outside into the living room and my sister, I think, was watching The Puppet Master. And I fell in love with the way that the puppets moved. And I needed to watch it. It didn't matter that it was a scary movie. I needed to watch it. So I went out, I found a VHS copy, because VHS was a thing then, and I saw The Puppet Master, and I loved it. And I went out, and I found all the other ones, and I watched them. And I own them all in several different forms. And I watch them pretty much every year because I love them. They speak to me. And that's why it's here in December, the month of joy, love, and family, that I've decided to talk about The Puppet Master. But, small problem, there's 12 of them now. As of 2018, there are 12 Puppet Master films. And I assume you don't want to sit here listening to me talk about this all day. So let's cut this down. All right, let's remove these, and we'll focus on the core five, right? The quote-unquote true Puppet Master series. These are the five that are one long story, beginning to end. And then later on, we'll go into what I call the recap series, which is Puppet Master Legacy, The Curse of the Puppet Master, Retro Puppet Master, and I'll go ahead and throw in Puppet Master versus Evil Toys when we get there. And then, maybe next year I'll talk about the renaissance of the Puppet Master with Axis of Evil, Axis Uprising, The Littlest Strike, all of whatever's come out by then. But today we're going to focus on the core five. And we're just going to go in order. There's not going to be any ranking to them. I'll tell you straight up, the first one's the best one. If you don't like the first one, you're not going to dig the other two. Especially 4 and 5. 4 and 5 get a little... But we'll deal with that when we get to it. Let's talk about Puppet Master 1. So, Puppet Master 1 opens up with a first-person shot kind of going through this hotel lobby after they see a car pull up. And you don't see what it is, but you see that it is very short and very hard to see. He runs through the lobby without anyone really noticing him, while it sometimes cuts to an old man working on a doll. Eventually, a lady sees him, gets startled, and we meet Blade, the kind of mascot and leader of the puppets going forward. He's definitely the most famous one. He is my second favorite one. I'll get into my favorite one when he shows up. But Blade is probably number 2. And Blade goes up and tells Andre Toulon, who is the old man, that people are here to find him. We will later learn that these people were Nazis and that Andre Toulon was hiding the secret of how to bring puppets to life. He locks the puppets away, hides them, and shoots himself, right? Cut ahead several years, and we meet a group of people who are all in some way psychic. A group of them can feel the past of a room, like if someone was murdered there, or the much more apparently common outcome of people had sex in this room, and she really needs to, channel that energy for whatever reason. Another claims to be like your generic circus fortune teller who uses a crystal ball and everything. And our main character, who I guess just when he dreams, he sometimes dreams not really the future, just like a possibility of the future or like a way to interpret the future from it. It's kind of weird. But they are all psychics and they have all come here because their friend Neil tells them, "Hey, I found where Andre Toulon hid the puppets." And I mean, not the puppets specifically, just he hid his treasure here. But when they arrive, they find out that Neil is dead. He wasn't killed, he killed himself. And they continue to try to search for Andre Toulon's treasure, I guess, while they're there. And also, mourn their friend. The puppets show up and start, picking them off. And that's as much of the story that I'm going to get into because I want you to watch this movie and I want you to want to watch this movie, so I don't want to spoil a lot of it for you. So I'm going to move forward, avoiding major spoiler points, and just kind of go over the real stars of this movie. Because the people are irrelevant. If you think of any slasher movie that's not... Actually, no, any slasher movie, the main characters are almost always irrelevant. Like, yeah, Laurie Strode from Halloween was important, and I can't remember her name from A Nightmare on Elm Street, but she showed up a lot. I want to say it's like Natalie or something. But for the most part, like that, like, you don't care. The heroes are... I mean, not the heroes, but the focus is Jason, Freddy, Michael. Like, these are the people. So let's go over the puppets that are featured in this film. First, we met him earlier. His name is Blade. Not a super creative name. He has a blade for one hand, a hook for the other. That's the extent of Blade's power or ability. He just has a knife in one hand, hook for another, and sometimes his eyes have little, like, needles in them. They really only show up when he's excited or angry. It's a sign of he feels emotion or is overwhelmed by emotion. And he looks really cool. That's all that Blade has to offer. A lot of these puppets are very simple right now. Like his partner in crime and friend, I don't know, Pinhead. Pinhead is well named, large body, tiny head, very strong. Strong enough to take down a full-grown adult person as a puppet and physically beat them to death. Now, they do all have backstories of why they are the way they are, but we're not going to get into that for several movies. So just at the moment, they are what they are, and that's all that they are. So that's Pinhead. He's very strong. He's also not the brightest. He doesn't have a lot of combat strategy that's not run up and pop, 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 pop until they're dead. But that's okay, because he does have a friend who is a master of stealth kills, and that is Mrs. Leach. Mrs. Leach has one of the slowest killing abilities ever. She requires her target to be completely incapacitated and unable to defend themselves so that she can regurgitate leeches out of her mouth. Like, she vomits them up and onto her victim's body, killing them. That's how she kills them. Usually she is assisted, obviously she has to be, by Blade or Pinhead, who holds them down or otherwise incapacitate them and leave them to her to finish the job. I don't know why. I guess they just like working together because they don't gain anything from how she kills people. But that's Mrs. Leach. The other side of the coin is the Jester, who is the emotional core of the team, I guess. He's the one who kind of decides what the puppets believe and who they follow. As long as Jester is happy, the puppets are happy. If Jester doesn't like what's happening, puppets are going to solve that problem. Jester has no powers. He has a little stick that sometimes works like a little club, but for the most part, his gifts are basically just his face is split into 3 different sections, that can spin freeform and land in different emotions like anger, happiness, sadness, fear, things like that. But other than that, he has no powers. He's not particularly strong, he's not fast, he's not stealthy. Jester is Jester and nothing else. He is the weirdest puppet, considering he is on almost every single movie. So whatever. At the end, we have Tunneler, who is a lot better than Jester and probably even better than Mrs. He's up there in terms of kill potential with Blade, maybe a little higher than Pinhead. He is a normal person. I mean, he's a puppet, but he's a normal person with a drill for a head. How does that kill? He runs forward and drills into people. He can also use this as a torture device. He can drill into your ankles, your hands, your legs. He can also choose how far he drills, though usually he's going for a kill. And that's all the puppets that show up in this movie. And it's only 5, and they don't have a large group of people to kill. But they still make it work. And the story is strong enough that you understand why they're... The Puppet Master Part 1 is probably my favorite of the Puppet Master, and it's definitely the one to start with. And I definitely recommend you give it a watch. If you like Part 1, go on to Part 2. Even go on to Part 3. It's only Part 4 that things will start to get a little weird. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That was the preview for Part 1. If these puppets sound like something you're interested in, go watch it. If the premise sounds like something interesting, go watch it. If you watched the video clips that have been playing throughout this whole thing and they seem good to you, go watch it. I cannot stress that enough. But that is Part 1. Let's move on to Part 2. Part 2 is a very good sequel in that it expands on the original and takes it forward without seeming like it's just trying to make it bigger and more bombastic. It has purpose in what it does. It does take place at the same hotel, and we open up with the puppets digging up a grave. This is the grave of their former master, Andre Toulon. We see the arms come up of the skeleton inside, showing that Andre Toulon lives again, and then cut to a group of quote-unquote parapsychologists. I don't know why I'm pretending like we don't know that psychics are a thing. Psychics are clearly a thing. They were all psychic in the first one. But they're here to investigate the murder of the woman from the end of the first one, and some of the other characters have gone insane, or are presumed insane because, they're talking about these killer puppets. While they are there, they meet a man named Enrique, who says that he now owns the hotel, he bought it, and he's here to renovate, reopen it, hopefully one day. But they are free to conduct their investigation while he gets everything ready. Now, what he does from here on is kind of weird, but they don't have the ingredients, I guess, to form the formula. They need more, and to get it, you have to kill people. So the puppets are sent out to do their thing. And this is where the movie gets interesting, because this is the first time that puppets die. Now, granted, they're puppets, so their death isn't, earth-shattering or anything. They can be rebuilt and reanimated somehow, I guess. It's not really made clear, but they can come back. But this is the first time you see that humans can beat them and can fight for their survival, and this becomes important as the series goes on. We see the death of 2 puppets. One is... Actually, you know what? I'm going to leave that vague so that you can experience those moments for yourself. So, moving forward, this movie does also introduce a new puppet. This is up there in my favorite puppets. Probably number 3 behind Blade, but a very close number 3, in that this introduces Torch. Torch is a soldier, like a tank. He wears a leather jacket. He looks super dope. Got a little hat and everything. But the most important thing, I guess, if you're into how they kill people or whatever, is the torch that is his hand. And it shoots an enormous flame. Like, a flame so large that it engulfs a fully grown woman. And he's about 6 inches tall, maybe? That's very short, actually. He's maybe a foot something. But he is a small thing with a very tiny torch. So to just see this huge flame come out is beautiful. the basic premise is Andre Toulon is trying to find a way to get out of his skeleton body and into a man-sized puppet that he's built for himself. And he does eventually, and it looks horrifying. Like, look at it. I want this face burned into your nightmares. Look at it. Anyway, so in the process of gathering the materials in order to transfer himself into this mannequin, he gets very angry with how ineffective the puppets are. Surprisingly, I guess he thought the puppets would be a killer task force, despite the fact that one puppet does nothing. He has no combat ability, and the other requires someone to hold down her target so she can kill. But he gets upset, starts mistreating the puppet, and that is not something you want to do. The puppets, while they do have a master, it's called the Puppet Master, don't really care about their master. They do what they want to do, and that's it. If you are nice to them, if you treat them well and with respect, they will follow you to the ends of the earth and they will kill at your command. But if you mistreat them, if you beat them, if you hurt them, they will bring unholy vengeance upon you. And that's what they do to everyone in the hotel. It's beautiful to see. And I know that sounds like kind of a spoiler, but it's really not in the large scheme of things. This is a really good movie. It is a great sequel. If you liked the first one, you are almost 100% guaranteed to like the second. It is just a better, bigger version of the first one. And I definitely recommend it wholeheartedly. Let's move on to the third one that features my favorite puppet of all time. Puppet Master Part 3, Toulon's Revenge, takes place in the past. Kind of. It takes place in 1941 specifically, which kind of spits in the face of the established history, because in Part 1, Andre Toulon commits suicide in a hotel room in 1939. But we'll just chalk that up to, I don't know, they didn't think people would care or keep track because the internet didn't exist back then. So let's not care or keep track. So this is the story that kind of explains where all the puppets come from. With the exception of, I think, Jester and Tunneler, you see the souls that inhabit most of the puppets. Blade, Leech Woman, I want to say Pinhead, but he might already be animated when the movie takes place. But it's just to show where they come from and why they do what they do. They weren't always bad puppets. They used to just put on shows for kids. Granted, they were anti-Nazi shows in Nazi Germany, which is what got them into trouble. But they just wanted to entertain. They weren't evil. They weren't killers. And because he puts on these shows that insult Hitler and everything, the Nazis, they come down on him. They burn down his theater, and through a series of events, his wife is killed, which is what motivates him to go on, this revenge spree. So he starts taking dead people and animating them. It's how Leech Woman comes to be. It's how Blade comes to. This movie features my favorite puppet in the entire series, the whole series, in Six Shooter. Six Shooter is your generic old Western gunslinger, like a cowboy, except he has 6 arms. Gunslinger's supernatural power? He has guns. That's it. His guns work. They're real guns. He can also psychically control this little bandana that's in front of his face. He usually pulls it up before he shoots, and then he brings it down after the target is dead to reveal his constant smirk, and he only speaks in chuckles. It's the best. It is hands down my favorite puppet in this entire series. And there's not a lot really to unpack here outside of it's the background for the puppets. You get to know something about Andre Toulon and why he became the way he did, but it doesn't really justify his whole part in Part 2. It's just, weirdly enough, it's to make you feel an emotional connection with the puppets. They're trying to humanize them for you, the viewer. And you'll see why come Part 4, but that's really the point of this movie. So I'm sorry, there's not really a lot to say about it. Is it as good as 2? Kind of. It trades some of the fun that they have with it and the horror for just like an action revenge flick. It is just puppets trying to get revenge for their master. The kills are a lot better, in my opinion, especially the last in the film. But other than that, it's not the best. Definitely below 2 and 1, probably still above 4 and 5, and you'll see why in a second. I still recommend that you watch it if you're trying to watch the whole series, but if you feel like maybe 2 was enough, you can stop here. 3 is not super necessary. I realize there wasn't a lot said here, but it's just that kind of movie. It's just there to bridge the gap and make you feel something for the puppets. So let's just move on to 4. 6-shooter rules. 6-shooter rules so hard. Okay, moving on to 4. The Puppet Master Part 4. When bad puppets go good. So, let me give you a small heads up coming into this movie. If you are interested in the horror aspect of this movie series, the idea of puppets walking around, killing people, being general little nightmares and all of that, this is where you stop. This is where things are going to take a turn for the weird, which sounds unusual considering this is a movie series about living killer puppets, but this is where you stop. Watch the first 3, watch my reviews of the later ones, but bye, I'll see you later. If you are interested in the puppets, if part 3 did its job and made you feel like you were interested in what the puppets are doing, welcome to part 4, where we are introduced to Sutek and the totems. Sutek is a demon or some kind of primeval evil that exists in the netherworld, and he sends his lackeys / other demons called the totems into our world to cause general havoc. Now, people do still die in this movie. It's not like, oh, it's just puppets fighting totems now, But the totems are generally the ones who kill people, not the puppets. This is their turning point, hence the subtitle, When Bad Puppets Turn Good. It's fine. It's fun to watch, I guess, but it is not what I got into this series for. Most of the puppets are back except for Torch, I believe. I don't think Torch is in this one, but 6-shooter is, which is weird chronologically, but yeah, it's never really made clear. Oh no, is Torch back and Tunneler's gone? I think Torch is back and Tunneler's gone, even though Torch died in part 2. You know what? I'm getting it all mixed up. Just, you'll see it when you see it. This is a fun movie. This is good to watch. It's interesting. If you're a fan of the puppets like I am, especially people like Blade and 6-shooter, it's great. Give it a shot. See if it's what you think. Maybe have a few drinks first. Maybe, pass. But give it a shot. There's only one new puppet in this one. His name is Decapitron. He's not actually like an execution or anything. He's called that, I guess, because he has movable heads. Like he could switch the heads on his puppets, and he can only be powered by the serum and lightning, like Frankenstein's monster. But yeah, there's not really a lot to say about this one without getting into some spoilers. Sutek is an evil force that doesn't like the fact that humans have access to his reanimation serum. So he puts some demons into the totems and sends them to Earth, and a new puppet master is introduced, and he and the puppets have to send the totems back to hell or wherever they came from in order to protect the serum and the rest of humanity. That's really all there is to it. And I know that sounds a little sparse, but that's because you haven't heard about Part 5 yet. Part 5, The Puppet Master, The Final Chapter. Like every other horror film named The Final Chapter. No, it's not. So, this time, the spoiler alert for Part 4, the totems have been defeated. And the puppets are like, yeah, now we have a long break. Except, no you don't. Because here comes Sutek, taking matters into his own hands like it's Thanos in the Infinity War. He shows up in some kind of super totem. Because they don't look like totems naturally. They look like weird demons or balls of energy. And they inhabit totems like the way spirits inhabit the puppets. And he comes down to Earth to, slap some puppets around. And it goes pretty well for him, actually. I'm not going to ruin the end, but Decapitron makes his return and, does Decapitron things, which doesn't mean a lot to you now because you haven't seen it, but if you've seen it, trust me, it's pretty dope. Think of the last scene from fucking Return of the Jedi. Excuse me. And that's the Puppet Master, or at least the original arc. Things get a little weird from here. It kind of stops with the story and starts doing these weird side stories, especially Curse of the Puppet Master and Puppet Master Retro. But I'll get into those on another day. I still love these movies. I can't make that any more clear. These are some of my favorite films of all time. These are the films that got me into horror movies. Without these movies, I wouldn't watch the rest of them. I wouldn't love horror movies the way I do. So I can honestly say that you should give them a shot. They are all worth watching, if only to laugh at a little bit. So that's the Puppet Master, and it still makes me happy. Just looking at the posters here, I remember when I first saw each one, and I love them. Are they for everyone? No. You know, they're weird and super cheesy, and yeah, like most 80s slashers, but even then, 4 or 5 just come out of left field and alienate a whole bunch of people. That's why I do videos like this, so that you can know if this seems like something interesting to you. Yes, I'm trying to sell you the movie. Not literally, I don't have like a store or anything, but I'm trying to get you to watch it. But I want you to watch it because it sounds like something interesting to you. I'm not one of those guys, I'm not going to come out here and be like, this movie sucks, and if you like it, you're stupid, because you're not. Nobody's stupid for liking movies. Taste is subjective. Are there movies that I think are bad? Sure. Do I think people are dumb for liking them? No. There's nothing wrong with liking something. And there's nothing wrong with not liking something. I don't like The Never-Ending Story. But guess what? My girlfriend does, and I love how much she loves it. And I would never insult her for loving it. That's what film is. Film should be something to bring us together, not mock each other with. And that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the year. Wherever I go, I'm going to try to give you an honest, positive look at something, just to hope that it speaks to you on some level. But for today, I'm done. I have spent more time talking about a Puppet Master in the last 26 minutes than I think most people have thought about the Puppet Master in the last 18 years. I will be back soon. 2 weeks at the latest. January 14th at the latest, I will be back to put an end to an old rivalry. Hopefully I'll see you then. Have a good one.